In this episode, I have an interview with Brian Stover. He's a triathlete coach. We talk about his business and the business of being a triathlete. This is All-in-One Financial with Bill Holiday. I discuss financial planning issues of investing, taxes, estate planning, insurance, retirement planning. This is brought to you by AIO Financial, a fee-only financial planning firm working with clients all over the U.S., AIOfinancial.com. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Brian is a triathlete coach with Accelerate 3, and his website is accelerate3.com. He told me after we finished our interview that he's been biking quite a bit more with pools being closed because of the pandemic, and I think he said 800 miles a week, which is a lot of miles. That seems really excessive, but I mean, it's great, but it makes me feel super lazy. I feel like I'm kind of active, but that's order of magnitude different. So let's go to our interview. Thanks for joining me, Brian.
You're welcome.
How long have you been doing triathlons yourself?
I started when I was 16 or 15, so 98 or 99 is when I first started in sports, endurance sports.
No, that's a good stretch. I think of triathlons as a later sport generally, but I don't know if that's typical. Are there a lot of young competitors?
Now it's really popular. Back in the day, I pretty much knew all the 19 and under triathletes in the United States and Canada.
A small group.
Yes, and I would go to races, and everybody I went with to races, they were in their 20s, 30s, 40s. I just hung around with a much older crowd then, which was good for some life lessons, I guess.
So can you just explain a little? I know you're a triathlon coach, but what do you do? What's your client base?
I have athletes all over the world, actually. And it's really hard to put a description on exactly what I do because it varies from individual to individual. You know, some people need help with season planning. Some people need help with day in, day out. Hey, what do I do here? What do I do there? I mean, so it's all encompassing. Like I help with season planning. I take that 30,000 foot view and I distill it down to the day in, day out workouts that they get and everything in between that. You know, if something goes haywire or their day gets skewed, then I have to change things up and I help them to stay on track. And then obviously when it comes time to racing, race planning, power target planning, things like that.
When you say season planning, does that mean like just if they have events they're targeting for, just ramping them up for those events, or?
Yes, that's part of it, but also it could be sitting down in October, November, December and planning out which races are the most important races or which races they're going to do for the next season. And
Sure.
Then that gives me, anywhere from a 10 to 18 month time window to operate within. And then I can sit down and sort of structure, I need them to do this here. And then at this time period, I want them to do this sort of work. And then at this time period, we need to switch focus to this in order to optimize the results so that they get the best results come race day possible.
And are you just working with triathletes or do you deal with other endurance sports athletes?
I deal with other endurance sports. The pandemic has been very interesting. So I got my start in coaching as a year-round swim coach, and then I picked up some swimmers who still had pool access when their club team disbanded for the pandemic. So I had it, and they were both trying to get some college scholarships. So they had to get Olympic trial cuts in the 50, and then they had to shave off some time in the 100 and 200 in order to get scholarships to mid-major to major swim programs. So I had to step back into that swim world and do a really rapid deep dive into training methodology. And again, because they're sprinters and starting to get into the mid-distance, that's a lot different from triathletes where the shortest event you're going to find is a pool swim is 400 yards long. And most of my athletes are going, the shortest event they're ever going to do in the pool or in the triathlon is 800 meters. So it's a completely different training style, different intervals, different repetitions, different rests. So it was really good. I mean, it was this humongous learning experience in all of about 6 days, or relearning experience, I should say. So it was
fun getting a challenge and something different thrown at you.
It was actually a lot of fun, but then their pool shut down. And so now they're So, and then I picked up a couple of bike racers whose teams had disbanded through the pandemic. So that's been good. And then I've had a few triathletes leave. They, a couple of them were just, hey, like my races got canceled. I can't stay motivated. I see no path to the world championships this year. And they were just done. They literally in all the space of 1 to 2 days, they were like, well, yeah, I'm going to keep training to I'm out.
Yeah. What are you finding? I know in Arizona pools are starting to open. I don't know how they're kind of opening. I imagine there's group biking, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's people getting out in groups. I have been hesitant to ask my athletes to do that. And I know a couple of them are riding with people that they know really well and trust, and I'm fine with that. And I have a couple athletes in states where health clubs and gyms and pools have completely reopened, but their specific pool that they go to, and this is in Georgia that I'm thinking of, their specific pool that they go to has just said, no, we're not opening yet. We don't feel it's safe. And I think this is a situation where I've had everybody just load up on the biking and running. This is a unique time. And you can't really ask for a better time to focus on two sports than when you have no racing in the foreseeable future.
Do you have any idea when things could start again for races?
I've talked to a few of my friends who are race directors on the East Coast, and they're looking at September doing some pool sprint tries. So they can control everything in the pool. They can space the people out further. They can control with one person per swim lane. They have not a limited area, but they have a very large area where they can do the transition. So they can double their transition space for the same number of people. And instead of having 6 people on a rack, they'll go with 3 people on a rack where you rack your bikes. And then they can double the width of the run course because it's all on like a high school campus. And then they can put groups, because it is in a pool, they can have groups of 10 line up 10 feet apart, and they send them off every 15, every 20 seconds. And then they can have a minute or 2 minute break between groups of 10 or 20 or 25 to help keep that distancing.
So instead of serpentine, you just have everyone stay in their lane and leave, and then the next group.
Well, they're having them go up, flip under the lane line, and come back. And so it is a serpentine, but because everybody's so spaced out, if you seed yourself correctly in the swim times, which is going to be a little bit difficult, but you should really, with a 15 or 20-second gap between swimmers, eliminate a lot of that passing. You're still going to get some passing, right? Like it's just going to happen.
But you'll minimize it.
Yeah.
It is. It seems like a pretty good sport for this because of that. There's not that much contact or close interaction.
Right, until you get to a race with 2,500 people where you have right, because your transition size is limited. I mean, you're not going to rent out a park and have unlimited space. And then for that many people, you need banks of porta johns, and now you have to space those out and or add any more, because you can't have 20 porta johns with 20 people in line waiting to go at the same time. You have to space that out. I see some challenges with a lot of the bigger races, and unfortunately, the bigger companies have the financial means to put on races more so than the smaller companies that are surviving season to season. It's just that what do you do with that many people in one spot? Right now you can't. Like, it's just not safe. Like, I don't feel it's safe personally. And I think that's the consensus of a lot of my athletes. I mean, a lot of my athletes had international races this season and they've gotten canceled, or they can't get a visa to get into that country anyway. So
yeah, I don't know how safe traveling is right now.
Oh, I think if you're in New Zealand, Australia, it's really safe, because I think New Zealand has had in the last 6 weeks like 4 new cases. In Australia, my sister who lives in Sydney, her kids are already back in school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I know you travel a lot. What portion of the clients do you see, and what portion is just virtual interaction? I mean, I know it's all virtual now.
Right. I think I have about 22, 23 athletes, 21, 20, somewhere in that range. I've been pretty lucky that most of my athletes stay with me for 4 or 5 seasons, 6 seasons. I think I have one 6.5 years right now, and they're still improving, which is good. So I've been fortunate that I have probably met just about everybody who's been with me for 2 seasons or more, including the internationals. So if I go, like when I go to visit my sister in Australia, like I have no problem stopping over in New Zealand to see an athlete, hang out with them a few days, and then go on to my sister's house. Or if I haven't, I have a few Australian-based athletes, right? I'll go down to Canberra, or I can fly out to Perth or whatever and see those athletes and just tack it onto a family trip.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have clients that are actually making a living as athletes?
I've got a few pro triathletes right now. None of them are what would be considered like a top tier pro. They're second, third tier pros or very young in the sport pros, first or second year. So they're making some money here and there. It's not their primary source of income.
Gotcha. Okay. And how are they making money? Just from winning events, or do they get
Yeah,
sponsors?
they're winning prize money. They have bonus structures. So if they place top three overall, they might get a bonus, or if they have the fastest bike split or the fastest run, some of their sponsors may have a bonus structure in place for that.
How does that work? So they have sponsors. Do they approach different companies, or do companies find them because they're doing well in these events?
I mean, if you're doing really well, companies will knock on your door because
Okay.
everybody wants to associate with someone who's generating a lot of media press or has, 400 or 500,000 Instagram followers or something like that, because you can reach a larger audience. Now, if you're an up and coming pro, then you're going to have to go knock on doors and do a little sales work there. And companies are going to have to get on board with you for potential success. And that's not going to pan out for everybody, but right, like you're going to get on board with some of these athletes and they are going to turn out to be really well, and you're going to get some notoriety if you're a company, and some promotional push from that athlete for a few years, and then they may or may not move on depending upon what's going on. But right now it's tough because companies are actually, who have athletes on contract, they're actually just telling their athletes, hey, like we've got to reduce your guaranteed money because we don't have any income coming in. Our global sales are down 70%.
Well, I'm sure it's tough now, but hopefully this will pass and then
Right.
they'll be back. But so if someone is looking to position themselves to actually make some money from it, is it just do the best you can and do are there certain types of events you target or
Yeah, you're going to target some of the biggest events in the world because that's what sponsors want to see. They want to see, is my athlete going to 70.3 World Championships? Are they doing Ironman Hawaii? Are they doing Roth in Germany? Are they doing some of the bigger global events? And again, like if you're one of the top athletes in the world, you're already going there. You're going to most of these events or to a lot of
okay.
them anyway. And if you're an up and coming athlete, you might have some financial incentive to chase qualifying for one of the world championships, and or you might have some incentive to race some of the bigger races in order to get in the top 10. You might have some bonus money there.
Does it matter if you have a big following or if you're really real present on social media, or is that really it's just your placing?
It definitely helps. I think social media is the new placing, right? If you have a big social media following, you're active, you're putting out a lot of content, you're putting out a lot of YouTube videos, you're getting a lot of eyeballs, and you have to be doing the right things as an athlete, right? So if you have, a drink sponsor and a hat sponsor, you can't not show them when you're releasing content. So you have to make sure you're wearing the hat or the sunglasses or
Yeah,
have
yeah.
the drink visible. This is what they're paying you for. They're paying you for your social media content, for those eyeballs on product when you have, 40,000 people watching your video or whatever. And I'm not certain that that sells any product, but it's definitely not hurting on the name recognition front.
Sure, sure. That's interesting. How long do people, I know you're still doing triathlons, but how long is a typical, especially pro athlete, elite career, or does it just keep going?
No, it definitely slows down. I mean, unfortunately, the ravages of time spare no one. So, you see a lot of guys if they're racing ITU, which is a draft legal format, and it's very technical, it's very fast. These guys have humongous engines. Sometimes when they start to fall off the back of that, or they're just not able to place in the top 10 as frequently, they start switching to longer races where it's less technical and they have a much higher skill set and they can still get out 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years where they're at or near the top. But eventually, I think a lot of athletes, I think about 10 years, 12 years is a pretty good elite career. You might have a few athletes going a little bit longer, a few athletes going a little bit shorter. And obviously, with the pandemic, I think we're going to see a lot of athletes who have been approaching that twilight of their career realize we're probably not going to race this year. And they're like, hey, maybe I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more years. And they're just starting to pull the plug. We've seen a couple of high profile retirements this year where, they were still doing well. They weren't winning races anymore. They were still getting on the podium here or there. They were still pulling in some paychecks, but I think they've made some announcements where they're calling it a career.
Yeah. Could you say that again? There's different types of triathlon. So you're saying
Sure.
did you say ITU or something?
Yeah, yeah. So you have the ITU, which is a draft legal race series, and it's very technical oriented. You have to have a really high skill set in the swim. You have to have really good bike handling skills. It's sort of like if you think like look at the Tour de France or bike racing where everybody's riding in the pack. Well, this is the same thing. They're all riding as a pack. So you have to be a really fast swimmer to get out in that first group. Because if you miss the train, almost never going to outride 30 guys by yourself. And then these guys are also wicked fast on the run. And then you have half Ironman and Ironman racing, which is longer
So
duration.
ITU is smaller than a half Ironman
Yeah, ITU
or
is,
shorter?
they have 800 to 1.5 kilometers swim, 20 to 40K on the bike, and 5 or 10K on the run, depending upon which race you're
Okay.
at. And then a half Ironman is 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, and a half marathon, where an Ironman's 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, followed by a marathon.
And you're saying the longer events, you could actually last longer age-wise. But
Yes.
did they? I mean, the ones I've heard of is like the Ironman. I don't know.
Yeah.
They have an Olympic triathlon, right?
Yeah, yeah, the Olympic. So it's ITU is the Olympic style racing. It's short, it's fast. You've got to be, on top of the game. If you're, in an ITU race, you have 20 guys who can finish in the top 10. And in an Ironman, you have 5 or 6 guys who are going to finish in the top 10, and then you have one or two guys who are going to get lucky because other people made a lot of mistakes and they're going to finish in the top 10. And then you've got some other people just sort of rounding out the podium. In the space in an Ironman between first and second, you could have 40 guys in an ITU draft legal race cross the finish line.
Wow.
In an ITU race, you can have 10 guys within 12 seconds of each other, and you would never see that at a long course, at a half Ironman or an Ironman. It's
Sure.
usually minutes between people, not 10 guys in 12 seconds or 15 seconds.
Right, right. No, that makes sense. Do you notice a popularity difference with triathlons in US versus Australia or Europe or other areas?
In Europe, a lot of people, they're more into the short course racing. They watch it more. They know the names of the people. And in the US, it's very long course focused. And it's also more, from what my European based athletes tell me, it's more competitive than here in the US. In the US, you have a lot of people who just participate and they don't necessarily race. They want to have a fun day. They want to get across the finish line. They want to do well, but they're not willing to put in a ton of training in order to really try just to go out and crush the race and go until you blow type of thing. And I think you see a little bit more of that in Europe, where you have people who, and granted, you obviously on both all over the world, you have people who just want to do Ironman or half Ironman. But I think in Europe, you probably have a slightly pointy end as far as the depth of the field in the age group ranks.
So would that mean there's more sponsors there because there's more enthusiasm around it, or?
No, not necessarily. I mean, because a lot of the brands are global, right? Like you think about some of the big bike brands, they're global brands. You think about wetsuit brands, they're global. Nutrition companies are going global. The pie is only so big. And if you're a US based company, you're putting all your pie in the US, maybe Canada, so you're staying North America. But if you're a global brand, you're going to have to allocate those dollars to euros and go with sponsorship on both continents or down in Asia, Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah. And I know you deal with athletes, and then I see photos of wind tunnels. Is that with your athletes, or is that a whole separate thing that you do?
That's actually a whole separate business. My partner and I, when I was in Asheville one summer, he's like, "Hey, I've got an idea. You want to go out for burgers and beers?" And so we had burgers and beers, and he pitched the whole idea of like, hey, let's do this aero testing. We started out on the Carson City Velodrome using this technology from Alpha Mantis, which has been bought by Garmin. And you're trying to optimize riders to be more aerodynamic so that they can go faster on the same amount of watts or for the same amount of energy they're putting out. Now we only use A2 wind tunnel in Mooresville, North Carolina. And we do the same thing. So we take athletes in the wind tunnel. We try to position them, change like their height, their width, their length, whatever. And then we also do research and development for companies. We do independent testing if people want us to test products for them. We've done a lot of things that have never been done before.
But somehow you're able to measure in a wind tunnel the
drag.
Amount of drag. There we go.
Yep.
And so if people put a different helmet on or a different suit or are positioned differently, you'll measure the change. And you can notice the difference in
you can
performance.
reduce. The tunnel is sensitive to about 1 watt of drag. So, sometimes people just, they'll put their hands in a different position and we'll get these numbers that are crazy different. And we're sitting there trying to figure out what's going on, and we're looking at the pictures and the video from the previous run to this run, and then we notice they've moved their thumb around, and you're like, okay, never do that again, or always do that, depending upon how it works. And then we'll do another trial or 2 trials just to make sure that to confirm that finding. It's really interesting. Like in the 6-hour day, I'm super stressed because people are paying $11-12 a minute for us to test them.
Yeah.
And every 3 to 4 to 5 minutes, you have to make a decision based upon the data coming in. So you don't, if you're planning a corporate merger acquisition, you're going to plan this over months. But now I have 2.5 minutes to look at data, see the trends, and make a decision and go back in there. So I find that stressful because I want people to have the best experience possible.
Right.
And and sometimes it can be frustrating because they can be insensitive to change. And sometimes it's just, sometimes it's super easy in there, and sometimes it's just really hard to make a difference.
I could see the time pressure being tough. And I could see that if someone says, stick your hand behind your head and it's better, you may not want, or whatever. I mean, change your position. It may not be what you want to do, but that's interesting. Well, anything else you have? Any suggestions for athletes, especially athletes looking at trying to get funding and get sponsored and get into this?
If you're an age group athlete and you're showing a lot of talent and you want to take it to the next level and join the elite ranks, everything you do right now will have ripple effects forever in your career. So the more training you can do and the smarter you are about your training now, the faster you're going to be next season. And the easier when you make that jump, the easier that jump will be. I think now is a great time because we are going to see some people leave sport where they're just like, hey, I had 1 or 2 more years left and I'm just done. And we're going to see some people who are just going to go all in on their training because they can now ride their bike for 300 or 400 or 600 miles a week and still run their normal run volume and not worry about the swim. The second thing is I think you need to do 1 or 2 things to add structure to your life, where maybe it's a part-time job at the YMCA or something like that, where it now reduces your cost to be a gym member and you get paid to go to work, 2 or 3 days a week for 2 or 3 hours, and it gives you some structure around your life.
Yeah, good advice. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Accelerate3@gmail.com. You can also go to accelerate3.com and there's a contact form on there and you can, write out whatever. And Accelerate3 on Instagram and Twitter as well.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Brian. That's good information.
Bill. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to AIO Financial. This has been brought to you by AIO Financial. If you need help with any part of your finances, please contact AIO Financial for a free meeting, aiofinancial.com. We also have a free ebook that provides an introduction to investing at aiofinancial.com/invest ebook. We appreciate any comments, questions that you have for us. You can comment where you find this on the video on the blog. Please subscribe to the video and podcast. Leave a rating and a review. That would be really helpful. Any comments you have, I really appreciate any time people reach out. It makes me feel like I'm not just speaking into a void. So I hope you do well or you're doing well. Take care.